This is week 2 of the fall trimester of 2017. This is a photo from my painting last Friday. So on Monday, I had the first wash of the figure done and all nice and dry. And I knew that the legs were too small. And so I knew that was going to be a big correction that I wanted to do today on Monday. And also I wanted to start blocking in the colors of the figure and the background and everything. So I start off and I mix up the colors that I think I'm going to be using that day. And I look up to the model and compare the model to my painting, and the pose is just so drastically different from what I have on my painting. And if you watched my video from last week, I talk about how it's normal for the model to shift around and to settle in a pose, and it usually takes them about a week to settle in it. So that first week, last week, I'm chasing the pose, and the pose started off where he's kind of crunched up, and then it slowly straightened up a little bit more, and I think he moves to the left or the right, and then he kind of turns his torso more towards my angle. And on Monday, everything was completely different and not consistent with what he was doing last week, which this particular model I find really difficult to work from, because most models will, like I said, they take a week and they find whatever their body feels comfortable in that variation of the pose. It usually takes them a week, but then they usually are, I guess their body, like muscle memory or whatever you want to attribute to their body, will just fall into the same pose, and so it usually will stay pretty consistent then for the rest of the time. But this particular model, not so much. He moves around quite a bit. And so the way that our days are set up is that it's 3 hours a day in front of the model, and he models for 25 minutes with a 5-minute break in between that. And so definitely for each of the 5-minute breaks, when he would get back up on the model stand, the pose would change a lot. So, you know, his legs could be out or more angled in, and so those were moving around. The big thing was, though, with how he was holding his upper body. So sometimes he'd be really slumped down, other times he'd be kind of average, other times he'd be kind of like bent back, really straightened up, or his shoulders would be, he would have his arms then be, or his elbows, I mean, locked, so his shoulders would be up, or one would be down, the other one would be down. His twist would be different, and also his head, which is kind of amazing how much you can move a head around with still it being tilted to the side, but having like such a dramatic difference from the shadow shapes that are falling on it. Somewhere like the shadow of, you could really just see the forehead and the nose in light, everything would else be in shadow, or if he moved, then everything would be in light. So I found this extremely frustrating to try and chase. And so by trying to chase this pose and to get something in with blocking in the colors and getting the legs to be right, I ended up, my painting just looked like a huge mess. As I'm trying to change things around, I'm getting white in my shadows, which is a big no to do, because then your shadows get cloudy and gross. And then I was getting black in my lights, and so everything was just turning out being really muddy and terrible looking. The legs, I did make an improvement because I definitely made them bigger, so the proportion of the whole painting made a lot more sense, but everything else was kind of, as I was moving things around, just getting fuzzy, like there weren't clear outlines between forms. And I also just mixed up too many colors as well, so the whole blocking was confusing, and it just looked terrible. I just was so frustrated with how this painting was turning out now. And I'm one of those people that definitely, when my painting doesn't go well, it just ruins my whole day, and I get in a really bad mood, and I just hate everyone and everything. And I know that's not healthy. I feel like in my mind, my painting has to be in a spectrum from good to great, somewhere in there. And if it's not, if it's like angling towards it being bad at all, I'm just like, just in a really bad mood. So my painting, it looked terrible that day, just terrible. And so I'm working and trying to correct it, and the last session that the model goes up there and I look again, and from what I've changed my painting to try and capture that pose, again, it's like whatever it is, like the head being up or down, or the shoulders moving around, or the legs, it was just completely different. So I just got so frustrated that I didn't even finish the model session, and I walked out and I went next door and just ranted to my friend till it was lunchtime. And in the whole just me being frustrated, I forgot to take a photo of it as well, so I don't have something to show for how my painting ended up on Monday, which I really wish I would have remembered to take the photo, because I think I really turned my painting around, so it would have been like you could have seen like a really big progression from block-in on Monday all the way through the end of the block-in on Friday. Oh well. This is what my painting looked like at the end of Tuesday. I cringe looking at this photo because the head is just still so poorly painted. I feel like I'm kind of getting the flow and locking in the body a little bit more now, but the head, I cannot catch it. It's moving around so much, and I guess I'm not that confident yet with portraits to get this in, especially a head that's angled down as much as his is. So honestly, I'm trying as best as I can to capture when the model is in the pose that I had previously had, and then trying to figure out the big shape of that and the big shadow shape and light shape in it. But I feel like I'm also trying to get more of even a general head, and seeing if I can go from general to try and get it more specifically to look like the model, but I feel like I'm still just struggling with the head. Something though that I think I'm starting to figure out is how to do a proper block-in. And a block-in where I'm blocking in the values and the colors, so it's the step after getting the first wash-in where I'm just having a big light shape and a big shadow shape. Then I work on the block-in, which is really establishing the whole color scheme of the painting and also the value structure, so the color structure and value structure. And so the day before on Monday, when I'm working on the block-in, I mixed up so many colors. That's probably one reason on me why it went so badly, is because I just had too many mixtures that was that I could get confused with working on the block-in. So this day I'm trying to see how many mixtures I could make up, the least amount of mixtures I can mix up to apply to my whole entire painting. So as far as the lights go, the lightest part of the model is the top of the thighs, and that's kind of like a pinky but yet bluish because the model is pale, that kind of color. So I've got one mixture for the top of the legs, one mixture for the lower legs, which is more of like pinks and yellows. And then I have a mixture for his whole torso, which is a lot of blues, it's a lot colder. And then a mixture for his arms, which I can also apply to the face as well, which is more of a reds and purples, that type of like ruddy color. And so that's really only 4 lights. And then for the darker colors, I have one mixture for the background, one mixture that's for the shadow color, and then another mixture that's the dark halftone, so I can, easily transition the dark shadows into the lights. So that's really only working with 7 distinct colors. And so doing that, I found it really easy then to start moving things around and to work on that block-in, just making sure that it's as simple as possible. So the big color fields, like talking about the legs and the torso and arms, those are all extremely evident and easy to see where colors are changing and where I can group them together. Wednesday, I do the exact same thing. I'm mixing up those 7 basic mixtures and correcting the forms as I can, and also if areas are looking too flat, I will see if I can pull from another mixture to help bring more volume to the forms. So for example, his whole torso, I have that that bluish color to it, the more grayed down flesh color. But then the flank of him that is, it's catching more light as it's angled up more towards the skylight. So to get that effect, to show that, I took some of the mixture that I had put in for his upper thighs that is receiving the most light. I put that in the flank that's right on his stomach right there. So it does give variation then. So you have like the more bluish tones and then a brighter tone there. So I'm trying to still express form on the figure, but still using my really simplified palette before I complicate anything too much. And I'm finding this is really easy to still be correcting shapes and forms this way. Thursday, I'm doing the same thing. I'm mixing up my 7 basic mixtures, but changing them to make sure that the mixtures are still reflecting the specific light situation that I'm seeing that day as the light's hitting the model. So I have those mixtures and correcting things in forms, and still the model, he's moving around a lot through it, and it's almost not so helpful to be, I'm finding it not helpful to be constantly chasing the pose, because then I would just constantly be repainting everything and it would stay in this like really simplified blocking all the way through the end. And I want to get something that is a little bit more resolved and more specific and not so generalized. So actually what I'm doing is this day I started looking at my painting in my mirror. So I'm looking in my mirror at my painting, and I would block out the model so I'm just seeing my painting in a different perspective in the mirror. And I would try and think about the model as a person if they were to get up out of the pose, move around or something like that, or maybe adjust in the painting, and make sure that all the proportions and the way anatomically that things are ending up in my painting, that they definitely make sense as a person. Like the arms would be the same length and the legs, even though that they're in different perspectives, that if he were to move so both legs would be facing me directly, that they would look the same exact size and length and everything like that. And so I'm looking in my mirror at my painting, seeing if I can adjust things to make this person look more like a person, and if I'm finding any flaws in how I've painted it. And I will go and make adjustments that way. And then it's not like I'm ignoring the model completely then, because then I will go and look at the model compared to my painting. And so my painting will, I feel like it gets better then with looking more realistic, but then maybe a generalized realistic and not specifically like the exact model's specific anatomy. So then I look at the model and compare it to my painting, and then I make those specific things. Like the model has really thin legs that are really lean, so then I will change my painting to reflect that. So I'm painting the specifics to be more of what the model actually is. And so I feel like that is going a lot better, and that's one way that I am helping myself try and catch this pose. Not necessarily catch this pose, I guess, but paint this model, even though the model is like moving around each time that I'm trying to paint it. So I've got the pose that I ended with last week, and I have this pose now. And so I'm looking at the model, even though he might be in like a different position with his body, but still I am still studying his body and trying to get the specific size of each piece of it that I can then apply to my painting. All right, and then Friday, the last day of this week, do the same thing. I make up my 7 mixtures, try and make them specific to the light situation. And as I'm working with this, I'm realizing that those 7 basic mixtures have taken me so far, and now I have to be making up some more mixtures. So for example, the knees are very pink, and I don't have anything on my palette that represents that, so I need to make up some specific mixtures that are pink, like light pinks, darker reds that I can put on the knees. So I end up putting them on the knees, the hands, some parts of the arms, and kind of applying that everywhere that I can. And I think we have 2 more days on this painting, so I think I'll be doing that more, where I'm making up more specific mixtures in specific areas that's not so generalized as it was before as the painting's progressing. Also, in this video, I think you can see that I've been really trying to tighten up the drawing, and by doing that, I've been using a shadow color, and I've been using a number, I believe it's a number 4 Filbert Polytip brush, which I'm finding really helpful to get really specific lines with that type of a brush. The brush probably doesn't matter so much. It's more that it's a new brush, so the bristles are really nice and clean on it, and like not splayed out at all, so I can get a nice line with it. So a lot of the with cleaning up the drawing, a lot of the forms on here are looking very outlined, which is definitely helpful for me to see, especially when I'm stepping back. I can really clearly see the forms because they're outlined with that dark color. I don't want to keep it this way because I don't want the look of everything to be outlined. So as I work more on this painting, I hope that I can get rid of those outlines so it looks a bit more naturalistic. Okay, and so for my afternoon project, I've been working on the pear project. I think last week I talked about it, but I'll go over it again. So the pear project is the beginning of, you're transitioning from cast painting to the still life program. So you have your pear project, and so you have a pear that you pick out, and you paint that pear for 5 days, and then you get a fresh piece of canvas and you paint the pear for everything that you did but in 1 day. You get a fresh piece of canvas, take the pear away, and then you paint the pear from memory in 1 day. So this is what I had last Friday that I ended up with. So this is the pear for painting it for 5 days. This is the pear that I painted in 1 day, still looking at the pear. And then here's all 3 of them. So you've got the pear from 5 days, the one in the middle is the one that's from 1 day, still looking at it, and then the one all the way over to the right is the pear that's painted in 1 day from memory. Alright, so done with the pear project, and now I'm moving on to my first still life project, which at the Ravenswood Atelier, we start off doing garlic still lifes. And they say that garlics are good to do because you have to be really specific how you paint them to get them to actually look like garlic with the specific texture that they have, and also that the skin on them is translucent, so it is similar to flesh. So I found a red pot in the studio that I'm really excited to paint. Probably more excited to paint that than the little garlics, but I have my painting all set up now, and then I stretched my canvas for it, so come Monday next week I should be ready to start the garlic still life. And then extras for this week, I did a little pencil drawing of a model named Emily. And then one evening I worked on my big copy of the Solomon J. Solomon Samson painting. I worked on Delilah. Her proportions were all significantly too small compared to the other figures, so I basically just worked on enlarging her figure so it made sense with the whole painting. And by doing that, I did the same approach with blocking in, trying to get as simplified palette as I can to block in the figure, which was then a lot easier to move things around.